Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with butternut squash and mascarpone cheese gnocchi. Or is it mascarpone? I don't know, it was El Capone, not El Capone. Anyway, however you pronounce it, this was so unbelievably delicious, and here's how I did it. It was pretty easy. I took a butternut squash. I'm only going to use about half of it. I want a pound in this recipe. So I trimmed off the top, cut it in half, split that down the middle. Once that was split, I put it on a plate, covered it in plastic wrap, and microwaved it on high until tender. Now I know we don't do a lot of microwaving around here, but it works great for this. You could roast it if you want, but this is just a lot faster and easier. So that's how I did it. You can do it any way you want. So that took me about 8 minutes. I unwrapped it, I let it cool on paper towels, and when it's cool enough to handle, peel off the skin. It should peel right off. If not, use a knife. So there we go. I got about 2 cups all together, and I'm going to set that aside until needed. All right, for the rest of the mixture, so easy. Some mascarpone cheese, very, very rich Italian cream cheese. We're also going to add a couple large eggs, some salt, some black pepper, and some Parmesan cheese. Okay, finely grated Parmesan. And once that's grated in there, I'm going to give this a mix. And right here I realized, why am I trying to mix this with a spatula? So I switched to a whisk, which is going to do a faster and better job. And you want to whisk that together until it's all smooth. And it looks like that. All right. And then we're going to throw in, which by now is just barely warm, butternut squash. I'm going to whisk that in. I'm going to mash it. I'm not going to puree this in a blender, which some recipes will have you do. I actually want those little tiny particles of squash intact. I think it's a little harder to work with, but I think it's much better for the final product. All right, and then the final ingredient here, which I'm going to stir in a couple additions, is just regular all-purpose flour. Not much. I'm only going to put in about a cup. Unlike most traditional gnocchi recipes, this is not a dense, chewy, kind of firm gnocchi. This is a very soft, light, tender dumpling. So we don't want to do too much mixing here. As soon as the flour disappears, that's it. It'll look like that, which is too soft to work with. So we're going to wrap it in plastic, and we're going to refrigerate this hopefully overnight. At least 4 or 5 hours, but overnight's better, and you'll notice the next day it's pretty much firmed up and will let us form our dumplings. But before we unwrap this and start that process, we need to do 2 things. We're going to bring some salted water to a boil. Now I'm using a shallow saucepan here so you can see what I'm doing. You can use a stock pot if you want, of course. And we're also going to melt some butter in a non-stick pan next to that water. So just use medium heat. As soon as the butter melts, turn off the flame until needed. All right, and now the fun part to shape our gnocchi. We're going to use 2 tablespoons. The first one I'm going to stick in there. I'm going to grab about, maybe a teaspoon and a half of mixture. And I'm going to use the second spoon to push it off into the boiling water. So very simple process. First spoon scoops a little. Second spoon pushes it off into the boiling salted water. Now here's some good news. No matter how bad a job you think you're doing at this, it's going to look awesome when it's cooked. Gnocchi hate anxiety. Okay, they don't respond well, so I need you to relax and actually have some fun while you're doing this. All right, so our heat's on high. We're going to do these in batches. I usually do about 12 to 15 at a time. I'm doing a few less here just for the camera. In like a minute or 2, they're going to float to the top. And once they float to the top, I let them boil another minute. So this whole thing only takes a couple minutes per batch. And after they floated to the top and cooked for another minute, I fish them out with one of these strainers right into my butter. And you can just let them sit there until you're ready for final service. And be sure to read the blog post where I explain what to do if you don't want to cook these right away. But I do. So I'm going to go ahead and crank my heat up to medium high. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to brown these in the butter, maybe 3-4 minutes per side. You have to be the judge. But basically, we want a nice golden brown crust and a light creamy center. All right, while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and season these with some black pepper, some cayenne, and another pinch of salt. All right, and after 3 or 4 minutes, I decided mine were perfect to turn. All right, so you can use tongs for this. I'm using 2 freakishly small wooden spoons. By the way, yes, I believe this is the first time we've had hot, freakishly small wooden spoon on freakishly small wooden spoon action. So that's kind of cool. All right, so I flip those over carefully, and we're going to give them a few minutes on the other side. And while that's happening, the last ingredient, I'm going to throw in some thinly sliced sage leaves, which just works so amazingly perfect with this dish. So the sage went in. I gave it another 2 minutes or so, and at this point my senses of sight, sound, and smell told me, hey, these are done. Let's eat. I removed those to a warm plate. I'm just doing little appetizer-sized portions. I'm going to spoon a little bit of that browned butter over. All right, you don't need much. Like a teaspoon's fine. What is that, maybe 30 or 40 calories? Everyone relax. I'm going to hit it with some Parmesan cheese. And there you go. Just unbelievably delicious. That outside is golden brown, slightly crisp from that Parmesan kind of crusting up. The inside impossibly light, tender, and delicious. So I hope you give those a try. This would make a fantastic first course for any winter, fall dinner, especially around the holidays. So anyway, head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more information as usual. And as always, enjoy.